Plan to keep the Colorado River flowing. Arizona, Nevada, and California have agreed to a new conservation effort to save the drought-stricken river. The goal is to conserve at least 3 million acre-feet of water by 2026. That's roughly the same amount of water as 6 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. The Colorado River is critical, supplying drinking water to over 40 million people. This plan could avert a potential crisis, but scientists say even more conservation will likely be needed after a decades-long drought. Up next on Ana Cabrera Reports, TikTok strikes back. The legal argument the app's owners are now making against Montana's total ban. Plus,
For surely all that snow is going to help fill up some of that river this year. They got so much snow. Out west, but for surely some of that's going to help. Making a big deal out of TikTok, ain't they? Seems like they are. Of course, they make a big deal out of just about everything. Oh man, let's see what we got here now.
That's 1-800-619-5507.
All right.
welcome back. More than 42 million Americans will travel 50 miles or more for Memorial Day. This is according to AAA. So if the pictures there on the left of your screen, those great-looking beaches serve as a preview for this weekend's activities, the ones on the right should be a warning. Give yourself plenty of travel time. Joining us now,
all that carbon dioxide going up into the atmosphere, burning all that much filler fuel.
Yeah, so Anna, first and foremost, we'd love to be at kind of the beach setting, but we're more on the warning setting that you talked about here at O'Hare. Things aren't quite busy yet, but the surge is expected to pick up as soon as tomorrow, heading into the holiday weekend. So we'll start with driving. If you're planning to hit the road, experts say the gold standard still holds true. Try to drive in those kind of early or late hours, like before 10 a.m. or after 6, if you can kind of avoid the middle of the day. If you're flying, like always, you want to get here at least 2 hours before a domestic flight and leave even more time ahead of international flights. If you're planning to drive to the airport, experts say try and reserve a spot at the airport. A lot of them offer that now. And also sign up for your airline's app. Download that app so you can get alerts if your flight is delayed or canceled, and then if you have to rebook, you can do that quickly. Hopefully you won't have to, Anna, but that's always an option.
Fingers crossed. Is the TSA doing anything to keep things moving smoothly through security?
Yeah, so it's interesting. They are expecting the highest numbers, actually AAA is, through America's airports this weekend since 2005. Close to 10 million travelers expected in the airports. Again, the highest totals in almost decades at this point, so well beyond pre-pandemic. TSA, as a result, has been trying to kind of up its recruiting and retention rates for employees. They have a pay increase among things they've been doing, scheduled for July 1st. They say that has been helping. Also, airlines trying to keep their staffing levels high, and in particular, American and Delta just struck new deals, they say, with their pilots. So a lot of that travel chaos that we saw last summer, especially tied to Memorial Day weekend, they say they can avoid that this year. And they say all signs are pointing to a much smoother holiday weekend.
We like to hear that. Maggie Vespa, thank you so much for your reporting. And that's going to do it for us today. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you back here tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, reporting from New York, I'm Ana Cabrera. Jose Diaz-Balart picks up our coverage right now.
And good morning. It is 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. I am Jose Diaz-Balart. Breaking overnight, a man driving a U-Haul truck rams past security just a block from the White House. Why police believe it was deliberate and what they say they found inside the suspect's truck. This morning, as we barrel towards the June 1st debt ceiling deadline, a deal to...
I can't believe that somebody would have done that. Let's see what they're saying about this.
U-Haul truck into a barrier just 1 block from the White House last night. Police say they believe the suspect crashed the truck intentionally. A law enforcement official telling NBC News the driver was also making threats to the White House. Investigators also seized a Nazi flag from the scene. Joining us with more is NBC News Capitol Hill
Another whack job.
Nobles. Ryan, good morning. What exactly happened?
Yeah, Jose, first let me give you an idea of just how close we are to the White House, and then we'll...
You see how dangerous it is whenever somebody like Donald J. Trump does what they do towards hyping everybody up regarding a forceful basically a planned coup. It just brings the sickos out that much more, and God only knows how much more of this that we're going to wind up having to having to have close encounters towards. You get these extremist people, regardless whether it's Nazism or Aryan Brothers or some other type of gang warfare deal. You get them all up in the air, and the next thing you know, somebody usually gets bold enough to do something that could turn into something even that much more bizarre and crazier.
We'll talk about exactly what happened here. First, take a look. You can see the tire tracks where this U-Haul came through, and then it kept careening up through that barrier right there and was stopped at the edge of Lafayette Park. And you can see the White House here behind me, only about a block away from where this U-Haul ended up. Now, the security posture here did its job. This truck wasn't getting any further, but it was relatively close to the White House, enough so where this entire area was shut down, including a hotel that's right across the street from where I'm standing that was evacuated overnight. They were concerned, of course, with what could possibly be inside that U-Haul. After they cleared the scene, they were able to open this area back up, get the people back in the hotel, and that's where they arrested the suspect, who they believe intentionally rammed this U-Haul into these barriers. They found some paraphernalia inside the truck, including a swastika, a Nazi flag. They're not exactly sure what that has to do with this incident, but we are told by law enforcement sources that he was making threatening statements toward the White House, attacks against the White House, and that's part of why he was put under arrest. And this is the suspect. His name is Sai Varshis Kandula. He's a 19-year-old from Chesterfield, Missouri. He's been charged with a number of crimes as a result of this incident, the most serious being threatening to kill, kidnap, inflict harm on a president, vice president, or a family member, and destruction of federal property. Now, it's important to point out that at no point
he'll be going to jail for about 10 years or more.
The president, the vice president, any member of their family were in any type of danger. Again, the security posture here did indeed work. But Jose, you have to wonder if that U-Haul had been filled with explosives or some other device that could have caused a lot of damage. A lot of people could have been hurt in this incident. That wasn't the case this time around. No one was hurt. None of the officers that responded or any White House personnel. So this was no doubt a very scary situation, and there will be a price to pay for the suspect if convicted. But at this point, and the investigation continues with no serious injuries.
You know, this is turning out to be more and more of a high-risk area, that the risk is only increasing and intensifying every day. I guess ever since the attempted assassination with Ronald Reagan and everything else that's been building above and beyond to that. And like I said, the insurrection that happened January the 6th just added that much more insult to injury towards destabilizing this great nation into becoming something that the devil and the devil's people is trying to bring on to our society. And people don't realize how sensitive that our open, free, fair democracy is, that if this was to ever get shut down or taken away from us, it would turn into a communism type tyranny controlled country, especially if you have tanks and national aviation pilots flying and basically bringing destruction upon to its own people just to be able to bring some sort of law and order in regards towards martial law. The more we see our radical politicians do radical things or make radical statements about this great nation, the more it is going to pull out the extremist, left-wing emotionally unstable people to the degree that what if that guy would have had an explosion, an explosive in that Ryder truck? I personally think that they ought to have like three different sectors of security leading to the final security of the White House. And of course, I guess that's what they're trying to do, is eliminate the possibility of threats. But there's always going to be somebody out there. I think it was not too long ago, somebody took a airplane, a single jet airplane, and flew it into the White House lawn. That it's 1,000 wonders that guy didn't get shot completely out of the sky. There's other events that has happened to the White House or the Capitol building that just adds that much more doubt and that much more uncertainty about what the heck is going to happen involving the next event that's going to happen. Because there'll probably be more events. I hate to say that, but there probably will be more events. It's really sad that we have come this close to the edge of losing our freedoms. It's really, really sad.
And so, Ryan, I know this investigation is just starting in many ways, but do we know anything about this person as far as does this person have a rap sheet? Is there anything about his past that we've been able to find?
At this point, we're starting our own look into his past. Obviously, security officials are as well. We do know that he is from the Midwest, from Missouri. He's only 19 years old. Whether or not he had any specific connection to any white supremacist groups or neo-Nazi organizations, that's something we have not been able to determine as of yet. Obviously, someone that would take a step like this, there's probably a lot going on in their background that investigators still need to look into, but everything at its early stages at this point, Jose.
Ryan Nobles, just outside the White House, I thank you very much. And now to the latest efforts to raise the nation's debt limit and avoid a potential economic catastrophe. Negotiators for the White House and House Republicans are working around the clock to try and reach a deal. As of right now, there's no agreement and little time for both sides to bridge their differences. Adding to the urgency, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen telling Congress the country's ability to borrow money is highly likely to run out as early as the 1st of June. The Washington Post reports Treasury Department is asking federal agencies whether they can make upcoming payments at a later date as the government searches for ways to conserve cash and prevent an unprecedented default. This comes as President Biden and House Speaker Kevin McCarthy held a high-stakes meeting at the White House last night, both sides calling the meeting productive. Moments ago, the Speaker told reporters he still thinks a deal could be reached soon.
We could still finish this by June 1st in a timeline. 97 days the president didn't want to meet. So, I mean, we're trying to condense everything in a short time frame. The House passed the bill and the Senate never passed one. So now it's more difficult because what else you have to negotiate from a lot of different perspectives. But we can still finish in time.
And with us now to take a closer look at this is NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba and Jake Sherman, who we just found right by the speaker in that video we showed. Also founder of Punchbowl News and an MSNBC political contributor, and CNBC's Dominic Chu as well. So, Jake, what are the main issues here? And is there any optimism that's real, or is it, we don't know?
Well, there's good days and bad days in negotiations, Jose, and today is decidedly a bad day. Kevin McCarthy took to a House Republican meeting, a closed House Republican meeting this morning, and told his colleagues that they are nowhere close to an agreement. That's what he said behind closed doors. And then he repeated when he got back to the Capitol, which we just saw on that clip right there. He said, quite frankly, the White House still wants to spend more money, and that's his estimation, that the White House is trying to spend more money than he would want. And he says that the White House has to spend less money year over year, which has been a big sticking point in these negotiations. So at this point, standing here 9 days from a potential default on the debt, we are nowhere close to an agreement. I can say that definitively. I mean, the good news is they're still talking. Talks haven't completely broken down, but people I spoke to last night who were involved and briefed on the talks with the White House, they did not have a positive view of how things went last night.
So, Monica, how does the White House feel about how things are going right now?
Yeah, I mean, the White House and House Republicans claim to have the same final destination they both want. They want to avoid default, but they absolutely have no agreement in the roadmap to getting there. And instead, I think you could say they're both kind of driving around in circles without making much progress. They continue to have deep disagreements on some of the big ticket items here when it comes to how to do spending cuts, when it talks about potential revenue, when you talk about the length of this deal, even that is still a topic of discussion. So even though both sides are publicly claiming they feel that there has been productive movement here, there really just isn't much work to show for it or progress. But of course, the negotiators haven't wasted any time. They got right to work last night around 9 p.m. for a while. They were back this morning to continue to hash out some of these major sticking points that remain, Jose. And just to show you where the president and the White House are feeling things are today, we're not going to see him. We don't expect him to have any kind of events or public comments on this. He didn't come out and speak after that meeting last night, just issuing a paper statement again saying that he wants to seek a bipartisan agreement here and reach a deal with the speaker, that the teams will continue to meet, but we don't expect to hear from him. And absolutely, there is a total sense of urgency, but there just isn't much actual momentum for how that's going to be achieved right now.
And so, Dominic, is there that sense of urgency on Wall Street? I mean, how are they reacting to all of this?
So, Jose, I mean, the stock market is basically seeing fractional gains and losses for the better parts of the last month or so. What it indicates is perhaps a little extra patience with the debt ceiling standoff for investors and traders. Nobody wants to make a massive prediction one way or the other on these negotiations or the outcome. Most of America should, by the way, take that as a positive sign. What it does show is that Wall Street is largely expecting a resolution in the coming days, although we are seemingly running out of time to get something done before Treasury runs out of money. What you are seeing, though, is some of the more trending market action in the government bond market being a little bit less optimistic. Treasury bond prices continue to slowly drift lower, and that's pushing interest rates higher. It's the market's way of telling the world that the full faith and credit of the U.S. government is relatively and incrementally less attractive. Not wholesale less attractive, just incrementally. Remember, the Treasury bond market is still the gold standard of the world sovereign bond market. So if push comes to shove, Jose, and markets entered a hypothetical panic scenario, it'd still be the place that most people would park their money to wait out the storm. But lawmakers need to be cognizant of the fact that our borrowing costs are rising, and this is most certainly a direct result of some of the fiscal planning efforts that are happening right now at the negotiations.
And Jake, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen wrote in her letter to Congress yesterday, if Congress fails to increase the debt limit, it would cause severe hardship to American families, harm our global leadership position, and raise questions about our ability to defend our national security interests. She says she's not raising the debt limit would be catastrophic. So where's the sense of urgency over a deal? Is it on Capitol Hill? Is it at the White House? Is it on Wall Street? Or is it nowhere?
Depends who you ask. Patrick McHenry, the House Financial Services Chairman, who is the one of the chief negotiators for House Republicans, says he doesn't see a sense of urgency at the White House among White House negotiators. He said that last night in a evening press conference that you showed a clip of just a moment ago. I mean, listen, I don't know why, if there is no sense of urgency, and that's his view, that's just one person's view, I don't know why there isn't. I will say that there is some skepticism among House Republicans about that June 1st deadline. It's a silly skepticism because Janet Yellen sets the deadline. It's her call. It's the Treasury.
Donald Trump has done said that if we do not default now, that it's just a matter of time before we will have to default later. I don't know how that they need to do this, but the bottom line is because of all the extra expenses and because of too many cooks in the kitchen, pertaining to too many crooks in the pile, too many people abusing the system, too many people declaring bankruptcy, too many forces of nature causing the insurance companies to fail in regards towards calling on the government for state of an emergency funds, too much of this, too much of that. I mean, since the 60s, since the late 60s, early 70s, the debt ceiling has been raised over 70 times. 70 times. And of course, whenever Ronald Reagan done what he done in the early 80s by no longer mandating paper money to be backed by bullion, by gold, that just turned this thing into an absolute free-for-all. And now we're seeing the results from it. So how they're going to fix it and what they're going to do to fix it, I don't know. But the bottom line is this: because of what has occurred here, it is now creating a stumbling block in the degree that now the younger people, the younger generation growing up, has to deal with this beast of burden that has been placed upon their shoulders that they don't deserve. They don't deserve to inherit this indebtedness. And because of it, it has basically made our government dysfunctional. That's the reason why my brother and I, whenever I come back here in 2014, put up the system. Basically, the cross represents the system, because it was the system that crucified Christ during the Roman era, whenever Jesus was teaching and preaching his message. Because the system is broken, we lean the cross to the side, indicating the brokenness of the cross or the brokenness of the system. See, a lot of people want to sanctify the cross. And they want to put the cross in the same imagery as they do the Lord Jesus Christ, and that is completely, totally unscriptural. The only thing that the cross had to do was the prophecy of Christ being put to his death by the cross, by the system. Because the system at that time used the cross to bring punishment, penalty to people's lives, that if they'd done something that was a capital offense, they hung them on a cross until death. Later throughout history, they changed that method. They went from hanging them on a cross to hanging them on a tree. Then they went from hanging them on a tree to electrocuting them to death. And then they went from electrocuting them to death to putting poison into their body and causing their hearts to blow up. Either or, it's the system that does that. And the cross is part of that system. Especially going back 2,000 plus years ago. Of course, if you get to looking at various methods that society has used to torture people, to try to get them to confess to a crime, if we think that the crucifixion of people that dies on crosses was extremely bad, in which it was, you should see some of the other methods out there that various generations has created to try to get people to talk. I mean, you talk about cruelty. We're talking about pulling people apart. We're talking about dipping people in acid. We're talking about pulling people's arms and legs and bodies apart. We're talking about having big presses come down on people that creates all this pressure until basically their whole body explodes under this type of pressure. We're talking about people that put in anthills. We're talking about people that was tied to a tree and a fire built beside of them. We're talking about all kinds of cruelty methods based around the system to try to get people to either confess to their crimes or punish them for the crimes that they have committed. Once more, the primary purpose for us putting the cross up out here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255 on Thompson Road, was to indicate that the system, as of what I was familiar with growing up, born in the early 60s, growing up in Tennessee, had now basically become broken. And that's the reason why that there's so much disrespect for law enforcement and for the system, is because the system has declared itself as being a broken system. And because it's a broken system, that's the reason why people don't mind going out here and committing these heinous crimes, knowing that odds are they're not going to get the capital punishment. They're going to stay in prison the rest of their lives. Well, That tells me that the system is now broken, because the system was not based around people committing heinous crimes and then living out the remaining years in a prison system, especially the type of prison systems that we have here in America. Now, if it was prison systems like they got over in Turkey and Mexico and other parts of the world, well, then you pretty well know that if you violate the system, the punishment is going to be severe. But over here in America, where you got TV, you got hot water, you got running showers, you got good beds, you got facilities towards watching HBO and everything else. I mean, their punishment is so minute in a lot of people's eyes, and I know whenever I say this, a lot of people ain't going to believe me, but in a lot of people's eyes, because they've never had an opportunity to get ahead in life because of various circumstances or consequences that goes on, going to jail is actually, to some people, a good thing. A matter of fact, there are some people that's been exposed to the system for so long over here in America that whenever you do let them out, they don't know what to do with themselves. And they immediately go and break a law again so that they can go back into the system. All it is just a cycle. Evolving door, where they go in one door and come out another, go in one door, come out another, go in one door, come out another. That's called a broken system. We do not have in other countries all over the world any type of heinousness pertaining to crime and pertaining to especially gun violence like they do here in America. America has been basically turned over to a reprobate, and now we have been damned. If we're not smart enough to identify the who, the what, the when, and the where, in how this happened, why this happened, we will never re-inject a decent society based upon a broken system. In other words, our trajectory is downwardly and not getting better, but getting worse. Unless somebody can come on board and change things dramatically, especially with all the drug inducement, people with all the fentanyl and the overdoses and the gun violence, and us being $32 trillion in debt, or right at $32 trillion in debt. If somebody isn't spiritually motivated enough to come on board so that the same spirit can motivate others in trying to fix these problems, our problems are only going to get worse and not better. They have raised the debt ceiling over 70 times since the mid to late 60s. If that's not proof in the pudding that something has horribly, horribly gone wrong, I don't know what is. And whenever you have a cashless system out there, a cash system that's basically unaccountable to the degree that you got all these cash sales going on, regardless whether it's drug sales, regardless whether it's cheap labor in all the vegetation fields, or it's prostitution, or just cash settlement type deals that basically Big Brother don't never see any type of gains from, you're going to have a broken system. And that's what we have here. We have a broken system. And as Donald Trump said, well, if you don't do it now, it's just a matter of time before you're going to have to do it. So if the people in the White House today aren't smart enough to straighten this problem out, then obviously it's only going to continue to get worse and not better. And I know that's not what people want to hear. I know, being the bad news barrier, how unpopular that message is, but it's a truthful message. I would be lying to the people if I told them anything any differently than that. So good luck to all of us, as we end our program all the time by saying good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our endeavors. God bless where we go from here towards not only a great nation, but a planetarian global society. Where we go from here towards being able to better our lives rather than make our lives more miserable.
Treasury Department's call when they run out of cash, but I don't think that's driving much. But there just are some House Republicans who feel like they do have more time, but that's not playing into the negotiation. Kevin McCarthy says he believes the June 1 deadline, and clearly the White House believes it because it's the Treasury Department that's setting it.
And Dom, I mean, are there any kind of safeguards or plan Bs on the government paying its debts past June 1st?
There are some extraordinary measures that they can try to make. And it's as simple as literally saying, what kind of bills can we pay right now? What can we negotiate with certain parties or certain agencies or parts of the government to kind of defer or make a little later payment on? That's not the point right now. Is the sense of urgency, Jose, that you brought up there and what Jake was talking about. It's all about whether or not, at least on Wall Street, there are still conversations happening among certain traders and investors out there that are basically just asking a hypothetical scenario. How much does the market have to drop? How much volatility does there have to be before lawmakers and the White House understand that this is going to be a big deal? You may recall that back in 2011, there was no default, but Standard & Poor's downgraded America and their credit rating from AAA down to AA, and that had a huge ripple effect in the markets. And even before that, Jose, you remember during the great financial crisis when we were trying to get a bailout package done, and every time Congress failed to act on it, we saw the Dow drop 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 points with each nay vote that would come out. The question becomes for many out there about whether or not there is a number, a percentage drop in the market that would drive lawmakers and the White House to say, okay, enough is enough. We got to get something done.
Good morning, God. Jake Sherman and Dominic Chu, thank you so very much. We're going to be back in 60 seconds with Congressman Jim Clyburn. We're going to be asking him what it would take to break a debt ceiling stalemate, and so much more. Congressman, it's good to see you. We'll chat in just a minute. Literally a minute.
Having triplet.
They have seen this coming over the ridge now for quite some times. So this isn't like something that just was thrown out of the blue to the degree that they didn't see coming. A matter of fact, I tend to wonder if it wasn't purposely planned, kind of like the little boy that cried wolf, that if you cry wolf long enough and strong enough, that once we do get to the edge where we should be at our most sensitiveness in urgency, this is where we become even more lax. So obviously someone has masterminded this to the point of where we are right now in the year 2023 of, I don't really know how they're going to fix it or how they're not going to fix it. I think they've thrown out there in regards towards the Amendment 14 towards basically defaulting but keep the government going. In other words, don't pay on the debt itself. Of course, whenever you do that, the way that I understand it is that at that point in time there'll be no need to be engaged in trying to take all these illegal prisoners over here in America that has come over the border illegally and try to transport them back over the border, because at that point in time, once that amendment becomes established openly, everybody here in America, regardless whether you was put here 200 or 300 years ago through your ancestry, or regardless whether you just recently come here illegally, that at that point in time everybody will be a legal citizen. The way that I understand that amendment. Now, I might be wrong about that, but that's the way that I understand the amendment. That whenever it's declared like that, in one way, It's going to be a washout towards no longer having to spend money towards taking illegal Mexicans or illegal whoever and getting them on buses or whatever and taking them back to the border. In one way, it's going to save in that aspect. But in another aspect, that means everybody that's been working here in America for 2, 3, 4, 5 decades, some of them 6 decades, drawing the checks and the benefits that they draw today off of the American system, that means that everybody that just recently come over here is going to have those same benefits, which is extremely, extremely unfair to the people that have helped to establish the system, even though the system per se is broke. It's a broken system. And this is one other indication of that.
The way things have been done, it's irresponsible.
Joining us now with more is Democratic Congressman Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. He is also national co-chair for President Biden's 2024 re-election campaign. Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. What's your level of confidence a deal can get done to stave off June 1st?
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm very confident that we'll get to a place that we need to be before the deadline. But I would say that it is very important for the American people to understand that Democrats are at 49% in the House, Republicans are at 49% in the Senate. So why should we not sit down and recognize that the country is evenly divided? If there to be a tilt, it ought to be toward the Democrats, because we had the White House, and this president won election by more than 7 million more votes than his opponent. So there is all kinds of incentives for us to sit down and find a resolution. Schumer and McConnell did so in the Senate, and I think that McCarthy ought to be sitting down with Hakeem Jeffries and see can we find common ground in the House. McCarthy has 51%, Jeffrey has 49%. And I think that there is to be found a resolution of this there in the middle, because we are evenly divided in the House and the Senate.
No doubt that that's certainly something that should be happening, at least conversations. Do you think that it took too long for the White House to reach out to the Speaker and start at least that negotiation sooner? And I'm just thinking, what is it going to take for Democrats and Republicans in the House to try and get something?
Well, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think that we all recognize that Janet Yellen has made it very clear to us that something needs to be done by June 1st, and I think it will get done. But what I'm saying is, I think we ought to stop playing chicken here and just recognize the realities. 51-49 Republicans in the House, 51-49 Democrats in the Senate, and whatever we do must pass both houses. So I think that that's the way we ought to be approaching this. The president has made it very clear that he would like to have a bipartisan resolution of this. He says that, knowing full well as I do, that the 14th Amendment is still there, and as President of the United States, he has some authority to use it, but he would rather not. He would rather have a bipartisan resolution, as it has always been. And that's what we ought to be doing here at this particular juncture.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with time really running out, right? I mean, there still is so much political talk, and it seems as though, when you paint this picture of, 49-51, one way or the other, does it seem as though those that are in the majority always kind of ignore the minority?
I don't think so. The Senate's got a very special way of making sure that doesn't happen. The filibuster is still sitting there, and it takes only one in some instances for some attention to be getting. We see that going on now, threatening the military force by not letting one person holding up all of these promotions of the military. I think that that's why this filibuster stuff ought to be gone, not just as it relates to civil rights, but as it relates to our military might, and that is a problem that we have, and we ought to be resolving that. This is 2023, not 1953 or even 1853. We need to bring all of these things into the 21st century, and we ought to do it now.
Turning now to the Congressman of the 2024 race, fellow South Carolinian Senator Tim Scott announced his presidential run on Monday. New Jersey Senator Cory Booker told MSNBC Scott shouldn't be underestimated. How do you see this run?
I see it the same way that Booker sees it. I know Tim Scott. I've known him for a long time, since he was in state government. I've known him here in the United States Congress. And he is a very thoughtful person, a very, what I call...
Let's move on here. I want to show my audience something here real quick. What they're doing here in front of the property at 291 Thompson Road. I guess they're going in and widening the road here, scraping it off on both sides, and it looks like that they're going to, I guess it's called hot cement, if I'm not mistaken, where they come in and pour gravel on top with other type of deals, rock, to be able to get it to stick. That way it makes the highway pull together towards more of a decent highway. I have been working out here on the Purple Heart Memorial. I'm not going to be able to finish it this year in regards toward Memorial Day, but I have been working on it and trying to refreshen it up, the Purple Heart Memorial. But it's good to see that somebody has decided to come out here and spend a little money and effort and time in trying to make our roads a little better out here. I know my grandmother, Miss Vera Aldale Jackson right there, she would be jumping up and down and being ecstatic and knowing that the roads was half as good a shape as what they are out here, as what they used to be. Because I can remember a time right after they went from basically a dirt path to putting rock on the roads and having a rock road, that in and of itself was a big ordeal. And Grandma and Grandpa thanking the good Lord that the county thought enough of them to do something like that out here. And I know it was a big deal on Highway 89 in between Kenton, Tennessee and Sharon, Tennessee, whenever they went from a gravel road to a blacktop road. That was a big deal. And whenever they painted the road, they talked about that for years. That was a big deal to them, towards having a painted blacktop road to where you could drive your automobile without getting your teeth knocked out of your mouth or feeling like that you was on a bronking bull, just being able to go to town and pick up some goods and come back home. So society is moving. It's just moving very slowly. And hopefully up there in the White House, they'll be able to resolve the problem some way or another. I think personally that it is a broken system. You can't fix something that's broken. But what you can do is reinvent a new system. Now, in reinventing the new system, is the new system going to be better than the old system? Or is it going to have just as many cracks in it to the point that we wind up 20 years from now, 25 years from now, being in the exact same shape that we're in now? That's the $64,000 question. In the meantime, I have put out our flags in honor of our veterans here at the Purple Heart Memorial, pertaining to the sacrifices that have been made for our freedoms. Just want to say thank you to all our veterans on this memorial holiday coming up, and hopefully we can pull together in being united rather than divided, and hopefully we will resolve our differences in going forward rather than backwards. Thanks again. God bless you. God bless America. God bless our troops. And shalom.